Welcome to BNEWS Special Report, Massachusetts Election 2016, and our topic this evening is ballot questions. I'm Phil Gallagher, along with my guest, BNEWS Director Rich Hosford, and we'll be talking about the 4 questions that are on the ballot. Not necessarily in order. 1 is legalizing marijuana, 2 is additional charter schools, 3 is farm animals, conditions for farm animals, and number 4 is?
Number 4 is the marijuana.
Number
1
4
is the slot parlor.
Slot parlor,
Southeast
okay.
Boston.
Number 4 is marijuana, number 2 is charter schools, and number 3 is conditions for farm animals.
Exactly.
So you should be receiving, if you already haven't as of yet, in the mail, one of these snazzy little things from the Secretary of State, pamphlet, which goes over for you in detail the actual ballot question language as summary, and then antagonist and protagonist positions on each of the ballot questions. So let's start with the summary on 1, which is expanded slot machine gaming. The summary is this proposal would allow State Gaming Commission to issue 1 additional Category 2 license, which would permit operation of a gaming establishment with no table games and not more than 1,250 slot machines. The proposed law would authorize the Commission to request applications for the additional license to be granted to a gaming establishment located on a property that is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not the first time we've seen gaming questions on the ballot. Nope. Yet at this point, we don't have a casino. Do we have a slot parlor at this point?
Yes,
1?
we've got the Plain Ridge slot parlor,
okay.
Which I haven't been to it yet. But,
me either. Slots just don't seem to be too much excitement for it.
No, a lot of people I think are waiting for the actual sort of resort casinos, but they want to put this one. It's not exactly, the ballot question itself doesn't make it specific to one location, except it has to be in the southeastern part of the state, but it does sort of generally understood that this would go next to the Suffolk Downs racetrack. That's where everybody thinks that it's going to be going. Right,
in Boston.
Right.
Which would make no sense at all when you consider that the first casino is likely to be in Revere, right? The Wynn Resorts.
That's where they're trying.
That's where they're trying. Well, they're at least closed after several years of trying. Right. Apparently, everybody's received some sort of revenue in order to eliminate their objections to the project. I think Mayor Curtatone was the last one who had filed an environmental impact report of some sort. Right. Okay, so what's the story on this? What's the pros, what's the cons?
Well, the pros, the people for it, that pretty much that revenue is what they're pushing. They're saying that they estimate that this will bring in $80 million per year to the state, $12 million to support horse racing in Massachusetts. They're saying that it will create thousands of jobs and at least $5 million just for the host city itself per year. So, you know, that their argument is pretty much, let us do this. It'll generate a lot of money. We'll go towards, you know, state and local sort of, you know, initiatives. The people against it, first of all, they say that this is an abuse of the ballot system. The ballot question system. These are supposed to be sort of like for the general, general state laws, and they think that people behind this are actually just the developers who want to do it just for their own benefit.
But specifically, the language does not allow for one location. It does not approve one location in the ballot question.
It just limits it to the southeastern part of the state.
Right, which we are not. Are we the southeastern part of the state in,
up in Burlington?
Suffolk? No, I mean in Suffolk.
I guess that fits.
Does it? It's south and it's east. Well, we know that much.
That's what it says.
Not quite sure it's south, but
I guess I don't know where the right through the dividing line would be. Maybe just.
So the first one is, according to the antagonists, is a failure at this point. There isn't enough known about the operation of it to warrant an additional slot parlor. Yet, somewhere in order of $60 million was raised by this thing last year, this past year.
Yeah, although, well, it's been being raised for us to get the signatures and then to get.
No, I mean the tax revenue that was already generated by the existing.
Oh, by the Plain Ridge one. Yeah, they say that it was falling short of expectations, but yeah, $60 million, right?
60 million. What was expectations? I mean, 60 million doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah, I don't remember what they sort of said beforehand, what their projection was. I have heard that it has been a little bit slower than expected, but I mean, maybe that's just the nature of, you know, we got full casinos right over the southern border, so.
Right. Well, that's another point for the pros, isn't it? That you know, for years and years and years, what now, two decades, all of this gambling money has
Right.
been going someplace else, and it's taken Massachusetts forever to come to some sort of a conclusion as to putting these things up.
Yeah, exactly. That is one of the big arguments, is that obviously there's an interest in it. I think Massachusetts has got one of the highest state lottery sales as far as like per population. And obviously a lot of people from our state go down to, you know, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun and the one right over, I don't remember what it's called, the Rhode Island one.
No, I don't know that one either. I don't go them, so I'm afraid I might enjoy myself. But
it's always a danger.
yeah, yeah. Let's go back to the process here. That actually was supposed to be my first question. Is there are 4 of these things that are on the ballot on the November 8th presidential, which guarantees that there'll be a huge turnout.
Exactly.
85, 88% might turn out townwide for this thing, and quite a number statewide. How does one get a petition of this sort on the ballot?
Well, it's a pretty long process, it seems. I didn't know this until I started doing some research for this show, but you need to get a certain number of signatures, and that number is based on 3% of the total number of people who voted in the last state gubernatorial race.
Yeah.
So this year, or actually they needed to have them done by December of 2015, you needed about almost just slightly under 65,000 valid signatures just to get this into the right process. Then obviously it has to go through state screening process. It can't be like against the Constitution,
Right.
things like that. But
Secretary of State, Attorney General have to sign off on them.
right, exactly. And so it seems like, I know there was a lot more proposed, and only 4 sort of, you know, are now going to be on the ballot.
Now, what about, you mentioned the lottery. What potential impact do you see having on the lottery? There's only so many dollars that can be spent. Are we going to be stealing slot dollars from somebody else, or are we going to be poaching dollars from what already is a good revenue producer in the lottery?
Yeah, I've heard that on like Boston Public Radio. They had someone from the Gaming Commission, I believe it was, who was saying that, you know, there's this possibility that they're going to see a decline in other forms of state-run gambling, because people, you know, they like to gamble, but you should only, you know, use so much of your money to do so.
Right. Okay, so where are you on that one?
You know, I think right now, personally, I would like to see this sort of maybe at least be held. We haven't gotten the resort casinos up. We haven't really had a chance to see long-term how well Plain Ridge is going to go. I think, you know, there's a possibility that in the future, but for right now, we have casinos approved that haven't been built yet. Let's stick with that, see how it goes.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of this one, although I'm not going to be attending or visiting a slot parlor.
Yeah,
It doesn't seem like much of a game of skill for me, but
no.
You know, it's construction jobs. It's going to be full-time jobs.
True.
If the other one is producing $60 million a year, we are going to be poaching from other communities that, or other states actually, that already have these, and then I see no reason why. And the other thing is that, you know, this is Massachusetts. It may be approved this year, but after all the wrangling and haggling and whatnot and delays and lawsuits, it'll probably be 5 years before you see the thing put up. So. I don't necessarily think that this is going to be the be-all and end-all of the slot parlor, and I don't necessarily think it'll end up at Suffolk Downs. Okay, the next one is charter school expansion, and again, I want to remind you, there's many numbers of pages of pro and anti commentary on these things. This one in particular, but so look for it in the mail if there's any question in your mind. This proposed law would allow the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to approve up to 12 new charter schools or enrollment expansions in existing charter schools each year. Approvals under this law could expand statewide charter school enrollment by up to 1% of the total statewide public school enrollment each year. New charters and enrollment expansions approved under this law would be exempt from existing limits on the number of charter schools, the number of students enrolled in them, and the amount of local school districts spending allocated to them. Okay, here's an interesting part. If the board receives more than 12 applications in a single year from qualified applicants, then the proposed law would require it to give priority to proposed charter schools or enrollment expansions in districts where student performance or statewide assessments is in the bottom 25% of all the districts in the previous 2 years. Okay,
Yeah, lots
go
of
ahead.
parcels.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think we should talk about what a charter school is. In Massachusetts, charter schools are public schools that operate independently of the public school systems, either by non-profit or for-profit organizations. They are mostly public funded. They are exempt from many of the requirements imposed by state and local boards of education regarding hiring and curriculum, so they can be, a different type of specialty school, and there's also less or no tenure for educators, so they can have more evaluations and performance-based evaluations, I guess, which is something people have been talking about for teachers.
Okay, so one argument against this is outside of representation, and that the local school committees would have no control over these, and also it's outside the contractual obligations of the community as it relates to the teachers union.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's both a positive and a negative in both cases, correct?
I guess it depends on where you stand on those issues.
Both a positive and a negative. Now, the argument, of course, is that this is going to take money from public schools, but is that true? If you're taking students, if you're reducing the enrollment, then you shouldn't need the same amount of budget for the school system.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that is their argument, is that they're going to take, public school funds and then give them, refunnel it. I don't have a good response to your. That's a good point. I don't know the answer to that one, but do you have a thought on that?
Well, if your enrollment is 1,000 students and now you get 900 students, I mean, your budget should be reduced. And in particular, I'm concerned from a educational standpoint that I think monolithic organizations are never very good for innovation and creativity and a variety of different things. And I think competition is good, which all public system following all the same rules would be wonderful if we were getting extraordinary results. But if you look at Boston, for instance, Boston's graduation rate is somewhere in the order of 70%. I think Marty Walsh in his inaugural address when he was elected mayor of Boston said that was one of his #1 priorities. Now, Boston is the highest school system in the state on per pupil spending, yet it has one of the worst results. And similarly, naturally, with some of our urban centers, they're faced with a number of different challenges that Burlington and other surrounding communities are not faced with. I think Boston has something in the order of 62 different languages that are spoken. So those are different challenges, and I think that throwing more money possibly is an answer, but I don't think restricting the availability of other options is an answer either. I mean, should we have charter schools that are trade schools? Not everybody's going to go on to a collegiate environment where they're studying 16th century French poetry or a liberal arts education. I met a lot of smart plumbers and auto mechanics and electricians. Have your water go bad in your house, and you find out very quickly how smart your plumber is.
Yeah, try to fix it yourself and find out how smart you are.
Really, how little you know. Yes, exactly. And particularly in, for instance, the second largest purchase that a person will make in the country, generally speaking, other than their summer home, if they happen to have one, is an automobile. And the automobile is becoming ever more complex. In the old days, I mean, I had a '58 Chevy. I could go out and change the plugs, change the oil, change everything in the engine, shocks, whatever. Now you go out and open up your hood, and it looks like you're opening up the inside of an Apple computer, So I think these are the types of areas from a technology standpoint that charter schools or trade schools, I know Shawsheen, for instance,
right,
although not a charter school, a trade school has had enormous success. Yep. So, I think that this isn't a bad idea, and I don't see it necessarily degrading current public education.
Well, the people who are against it do say that is their biggest fear, that it's going to, one, take money out of the schools, as we said. 2, because they don't have the same number of oversights, it's harder to guarantee that they're providing a quality education to children. There's less sort of state monitoring in that regard. And of course, you just have do we want our schools, which we have local control over, to have a local competition? Some of the people against it include both our state rep and state senator. The school committee actually came out against it, and the Burlington Educators Association said that they were against it.
Well, in all cases, they're an assault on their current position, so you could see why that they would naturally be in opposition. However, the opposite side of that coin is, look, if you've got a school that's failing, and you've got 33,000 students in the state currently that are on waiting lists to try and get out of particular schools, what obligation do we have to continue to keep a school that's failing open? Distribute the children someplace else, close that school. Competition's a good thing.
Yeah, it does say that 34,000 currently on waiting lists, and also, an argument for it is also another one is more sort of personal choice by parents and the students themselves of what kind of school that they want to go to. So,
now, of course, again, from the perspective of the teachers' union, it would reduce the size of their staffing. Naturally, any union would want members, but in defense of the teachers' union, I mean, Massachusetts is the #1 state in the union in education. So, a lot of that has to be placed at the doorstep of the teachers. All of it actually has to be placed at the doorstep of the teachers. So I think that, the positions that they put forward in opposition to this are valid. But I would hope that if it does passes, and I think naturally that they would be in concert with trying to make education a success in Massachusetts, as they always have.
Absolutely. And right now, the latest polls actually have this 49 in favor, 36 against, and 15% undecided.
But we know how good polls are.
Well, we will find out.
We'll find out. So where are you on that one?
I don't know exactly. I'm sort of still up in the air on number 2. It's, I think, the only one that I probably have to listen to a few more arguments. How about yourself?
Well, I have a number of friends that are in the business, actually a number that have worked here at BCAT as volunteers who have now gone on to be teachers, and they've been quite vocal in opposition to it. I have a couple of neighbors, and I know a number of the school committee members. So I'm somewhat on the fence, but in the final analysis for me, I think, again, monolithic structures do not always produce the best results. So I think I might go in favor of innovation here. However, I might get a phone call and that change my mind.
Well, I think we have a great school here in town, great schools here in town, and so I sort of tend to trust what they're doing, and if they are sort of unanimously against it, then I definitely put some weight to that.
Well, I don't think we're going to get a charter school here in Burlington. I mean, do we need one? We have a 98.7%, I think, graduation rate. Of course, we're fully funded here. There is no, well, the town and the school committee have done a wonderful job, but you can do a wonderful job when you're fully funded. Town meeting has always been very generous with money. We have no fees, no busing fees, no after-school fees. The only ones that we have are addendums to a current school, which is, I think, extended kindergarten and after-school classes and things of that sort. So from a Burlington standpoint, we don't need a charter school.
Agreed.
But we don't have a 70% graduation rate. Okay, the next one is conditions for farm animals. The proposed law would prohibit any farm owner or operator from knowingly confining any breeding pig, calf raised for veal, or egg-laying hen in a way that prevents the animal from lying down, standing up, fully extending its limbs, or turning around freely. And it goes on to, in detail, a number of other aspects of the law, the proposed fines, etc. What do you think about this one?
Well, I mean, so we have the obvious argument for is, just humane treatment of animals. There are some exceptions, by the way, that we should probably just point out that you can do temporary holding cells for transportation, fairs, medical research, veterinary examines, and other purposes. So it's not like, if we temporarily confine an animal that they're going to be subject to one of these fines.
Yeah. So you can put a chimpanzee and experiment on them and put them in a little cage, but you can't put a chicken in a little cage to lay eggs.
Well, I think people who would be for this would be against both of those practices. So I don't think, they're going to be, oh yeah, the chimpanzee thing is fine, but the chicken, let's save that. I'm pretty sure across the board they would probably be in opposition. There's been a lot of talk. There's been some of that sort of hidden camera footage coming out of some of these industrialized farms that show really cramped conditions. This is sort of saying that we won't either allow those conditions here or allow the sale of products that use that type of farming here. I mean, I don't think it's going to be too much of a detriment on farms to allow enough space for the animal to at least turn around, sort of groom itself, that kind of thing. They're the people who are against. They do say that this could raise the cost of meats and eggs, which is essentially a tax, and some people might not be able to afford that. And they make the argument that this could endanger the animals themselves and the people who care for them. So there are sort of safety things on both sides, I guess.
Well, I'm in opposition to this primarily because I think a farmer knows best. I mean, the farmer's putting out the product. Badly treated animals produce bad products. Includes chickens or any other. And if you're talking about the ethical treatment of animals, I mean, then you wouldn't eat lamb chops and you wouldn't eat veal or you wouldn't eat foie gras, when you have a goose who's being stuffed on a daily basis.
There are places that have banned foie gras for that very reason, just for how it...
Foie gras, yeah, foie gras. I always put the S on the end of that. But my primary concern here is that, this is a whole nother overlay of regulation in Massachusetts, and then you'll have enforcement and and we already have Board of Health throughout the state who are required to do inspections on these things. And this is even a more far-reaching law in that it reaches outside of the state. None of these, if you don't comply with the law, you can't import, or the retailer or distributor can't import that product. So I mean, what's the whole hierarchy of checking the
at that point, it really
compliance?
does sort of raise a lot of questions, like you just said, about how are they actually going to know if it's coming from somewhere in like the Midwest or something. I have no idea how they would enforce it.
Right.
And when we talk about farms and the farmer knows best, though, I think in this case we're not really obviously talking about the small farm, the traditional New England farm. We're talking more, the big corporate sort of mega farms. And I don't know.
But it's going to be applied across the board to everybody who produces the product.
Well, it will, but I think that the goal of this is more targeting that sort of industrialized farming that people are starting to see a little bit more of if they're, are on YouTube too long.
Well, of course, in any kind of a law, the opposition always goes to the farthest reach, and I would say, that, what's next? Are we going to ban the Discovery Channel from viewing lions choking wildebeest to death, or hyenas, eating the antelope and things of that sort? If you want to,
I would say no.
Okay. Well, again, if it's hard to imagine that a few inches in a cage is going to change the life of an animal that's on its way to the slaughterhouse shortly thereafter. But
I mean, I don't know how long it takes to raise a pig from birth to the point of slaughter. Probably
to bacon, right?
Yeah, to bacon. To a couple of years, I'm guessing. And being able to turn around and move a little bit during that time. I think
I'm
make
in
a big
complete
difference.
agreement with the concept. I'm complete agreement with the concept, but I think that the farmer knows best in this case.
Right.
They seem to have been doing it for 1,000 years.
Well, right now, polls, as good as they may be, 67 are in favor, 23 opposed, and we got about 10% undecided on that
It's a feel-good one.
Yeah.
That's a feel-good one. Nobody wants to see any kind of an animal.
All right, talk pot.
Mistreating. Okay, let's talk pot. Talking weed. Legalization, regulation, and taxation of marijuana, and this one is, as
There's
you
a
can
lot of
imagine,
backup material.
There's
on
a
this one.
lot of backup. There's like 15 pages of backup on this one. So, the proposed law would permit the possession, use, distribution, and cultivation of marijuana in limited amounts by persons aged 21 and older, and would remove criminal penalties for such activities. It would provide for the regulation of commerce in marijuana, marijuana accessories, and marijuana products, and for the taxation of proceeds from sales of these items. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, arguments for. People talk a lot about, right now people smoke weed. It's dangerous to get sometimes. You have to go, it's a criminal activity, so you have to deal with criminal type peoples. This makes it a lot safer. There's obviously the taxation. I know that Colorado and Washington are seeing quite a lot of money. I don't have the figures, but they're saying this could generate millions of dollars a year. They argue that marijuana is objectively less harmful than alcohol for people who use it, so why not? And then also it's just part of the criminal court system. We don't want people clogging the system, or people, especially if the arrest of drug arrests or go after one group more disproportionately than another, as this is just being a tool for that kind of overuse of the court system. And finally, people who are in favor of this just say, well, adults should be able to make decisions for themselves about what they want to take, as far as it's reasonable, and they argue that marijuana consumption is a reasonable thing to do.
Okay, how about the antis?
The antis, of course, when you're talking about something like this, there's always the chance, the risk of, more people, especially younger people, getting involved. It says 21, but as we know, for the alcohol, people under 21 are definitely, be able to get access to it if they're diligent enough, especially if they have, older people in their circle that are not really responsible. The argument against another one is that we are in the midst of a opioid crisis, and they say that, marijuana has been talked about for a long time as a gateway drug. They say that most people who do heroin have probably did, marijuana beforehand. There's a little back and forth about causation there, but they do say if we're going to fight the opioid crisis, why you just allow another drug onto the market that's going to be, quite so popular. And also, one of the things that they say is that the marijuana today is not the marijuana that people are used to who haven't maybe used it in a while. It's a high potency. Also, it comes in from these pot shops, especially in the dispensaries, I should say. In Colorado and Washington, there's a lot of things like candy, cookies, edibles that, if you're not used to it, can really sort of knock you down, because it's much more potency than you might expect.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of this, and for a variety of different reasons. From an economic standpoint, I mean, it's obviously a big seller. You could probably go out, in a half an hour, whatever, score some weed somewhere in this region. So it's a product that's being sold. It's sold outside of the economic structure. There's no taxation on it, etc. But what bothers me most about this is the hypocrisy that surrounds it as far as the legislators are concerned and the lawmakers are concerned. If we were, first of all, growing up, marijuana was not a gateway drug to opioid use and cocaine and smack and crack, etc. Most everybody, I grew up in the 60s. Everybody that would ever abused any kind of drug, the gateway was always alcohol. Okay, wasn't marijuana. Most everybody started drinking alcohol right out of their father's cabinet at home. So the hypocrisy comes in where, if you look at the 2015 FBI statistics, I think it's 2014 FBI statistics, there wasn't one death attributed to marijuana in the United States in 2014, directly attributed to a marijuana overdose. But if you look in the state of Massachusetts, for instance, I think we had 40 ODs on opioids just in the last month down on the Cape. We have thousands and thousands of injuries and deaths that are directly attributable to alcohol and cigarettes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we've been putting people in jail because they've either been smoking weed or they've been selling weed or what have you. So the hypocrisy of it drives me crazy. The cost of incarcerating somebody for a misdemeanor of that sort is ridiculous. And if we were that concerned about the health and safety of our populace, wouldn't we outlaw alcohol? Wouldn't we outlaw tobacco? The reason we don't do that is because they're enormous revenue producers.
Absolutely.
And the legislators would have to make some very serious budget decisions, which they don't want to do. So I think to hone in on, something that you can actually grow in your backyard, it's a weed. It occurs naturally. It was legal in the country for many years. So I'm in favor of this one. There will be enforcement issues, but a lot less than there are now. So I just don't see anything wrong with passing this legislation.
Just to make sure that I do sort of equally represent, the
The
different,
yeah,
different
absolutely.
arguments. A couple of the things that, I have seen, and I think that, one of our like local Burlington groups, the Concerned Parents group, may bring up, for example, is, because I think they oppose a lot of the, additional alcohol sales, like as a movie theater and things like that, just because it sort of creates a culture where children see, where they say, okay, they see a lot of adults doing it, they see, the storefronts, it sort of gets in their head early and often that, this is an okay, acceptable behavior. And even if it's okay, if we legalize it, it may not be as dangerous as alcohol, but I mean, to be fair, if you smoke weed a lot, you overdo it, you can overdo it like you can overdo anything, and it will have an effect on you.
Well, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't think we need 20, 30, 40 liquor licenses in the town. It only encourages more people to come here and drink and subsequently be on our roadways.
Would you like to see one of these? If this gets passed, a legal recreation dispensary
this
in
may
town?
be superfluous anyway, because most everybody can go to their doctor or some doctor right now and get a medical marijuana prescription. So, I'm not sure that this is, going to have that big an impact to begin with. And again, it depends on what comes out in the marketplace. If it's going to be too high priced or too hard to get, there's again going to be a natural street distribution system that remains in place. So, I don't know if it's going to have that big an impact.
Yeah. And another argument that I've heard banded around, and this one is in favor, is we have a big war on drugs, especially in Mexico, the cartels, and the more drugs that are legalized, the less profits for them. Obviously they're more also into other things that we aren't going to legalize, but just sort of the American mob was fueled by prohibition. What kind of organizations or criminals are being fueled by keeping marijuana sales illegal and at that level.
Well, the other thing is, if we're really going to get strict about controlling this and illicit use of it, particularly on the highways and in juveniles and things of that sort, is to institute a drug testing program. I mean, you can't drive a truck in this country now without going through regular testing. You can't play in the NFL without go through testing. So, perhaps you shouldn't be coming to school or driving an automobile. The technology is being improved dramatically to the point where, we should be able to tell quite quickly whether or not people are violating the rules that count. The rules that count are that you should not be operating a motor vehicle,
Right,
operating dangerous machinery, putting your coworkers at risk, also reducing your intellectual capability in the school system, also teaching, driving, any of the things that
Performing
coaching,
surgery would be good.
Performing surgery, exactly, that would be good. So there are many different things that can be put in place to control this, but more importantly, from a law enforcement standpoint, why is there a proliferation of heroin on the streets in Massachusetts? Why is heroin right now less expensive than marijuana? This is good. A stop has to be put to this some way. So rather than incarcerate people that are smoking weed or controlling weed, we need to be cracking down severely on dope,
Heroin and opioids.
Heroin, crack, and cocaine isn't in that. Well, smoking cocaine, crack certainly, but in those categories. Now, the Chinese almost eradicated completely opium use in the early 1800s, I think. But of course, the penalty was death. So I'm not sure we should go that far. Great. Final note.
Final note. Well,
Where are you on that one?
I think I am in favor. I'm mostly just for I do agree in the idea of personal responsibility and personal being able to sort of do what you want as long as it's within some sort of limit. Like I don't think we should legalize cocaine or meth, but I do think that this has shown that enough people have safely used it, and I don't think that we should be locking them up for it anymore.
Okay, that's it from the news desk here at BNEWS Weekly Special Report, Ballot Questions, Election 2016. I'm Phil Gallagher, and my guest has been BNEWS Director Rich Hosford. Rich, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.